Zipper rolls out to the right, pitches off to Taylor, and Taylor's to the 20, down to the 15, down to the 10, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Touchdown, Billy Taylor! Touchdown, Billy Taylor! Billy Taylor scored a touchdown from 21 yards out. The crowd goes berserk. It was November 22nd, 1969. That they came to Barry, Michigan, all dressed in maize and blue. The words were said, the prayers were read, and everybody cried. But when they closed the coffin, there was someone else inside. Oh, they came to Barry, Michigan, but Michigan wasn't dead. And when the game was over, it was someone else instead. 11 Michigan Wolverines put on the gloves of gray, and as the organ played the victors, they laid Woody Hayes away. Under center is Wangler at the 45. He goes back. He's looking for a receiver. He throws downfield to Carter. Who's got it better than us? Nobody!
Welcome to the Michigan Man Podcast on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew, for Wolverine fans from coast to coast. Go Blue, and welcome to our game day edition of the show. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. Joining us shortly will be beat writer Austin Meek from The Athletic. First, a few of my thoughts to get us started. It's been a great start to the season for us. 5-0 and heading into Bloomington this Saturday with a huge game looming on the horizon next week. First things first, though, we need to take care of business against Indiana. You have to take every road game seriously in this conference or it will bite you in the butt. Even if it would appear your opponent just isn't that good. That's what makes any road game dangerous. Some would say this is a trap game as we might be looking ahead to Penn State. I don't think that's going to happen. This team hasn't even scratched the surface on what they can be offensively, which is a scary thought for opponents. I think the same can be said for the defense. We've been rock solid out there with a lot of new faces, and I could be wrong, but I think our best football on both sides of the ball is yet to come. I hope so anyway. My guest today says if Indiana has any hope of competing with us, they have to keep it close and get off to a fast start. From what he's seen of the Hoosiers, that will be a tall order. Up next is Michigan beat writer Austin Meek from The Athletic. So stay with us. Here with us on the show today is beat writer Austin Meek from The Athletic. Great to once again have you back, Austin.
Hey, Mike. Thanks for having me.
Well, Austin, Michigan stays on the road this weekend, traveling to Indiana. It's week 6. Before we talk about that matchup with the Hoosiers, let's, if we could, take a brief look back at the Iowa game, get your thoughts. And what, if anything new, did you learn about this Michigan team on Saturday?
Well, I think that I was definitely curious to see how Michigan would respond the first time playing away from home in a difficult environment where Michigan hadn't won since 2005, I believe, against a team that, even though Iowa has struggled offensively, that's one of the better defenses Michigan is going to face this year. So I was really curious to see how J.J. McCarthy would respond to that in his first start away from home. I was curious to see how Michigan's offense would respond and just how the team as a whole would respond if they were in a situation where they had some adversity, really, for one of the first times this season. And I thought they responded well. That was a game that Michigan controlled most of the game. but there were a couple points in there where Iowa did have some momentum, and Michigan had to figure out how to get the game back on their side, and I thought that they did that. They made some plays when they needed to really take the crowd out of it and to really come away with a pretty convincing win in a place that's been tough for Michigan through the years.
Well, as you said, it was J.J. McCarthy's first road test, as well as the team's first road test as a starter for J.J., I should say. And we all agree against a very good defense. And he seemed just very loose, very confident, and comfortable the entire game, didn't he?
Yeah, I thought Michigan had a good game plan. Pretty clearly, Michigan wanted to be patient on offense, to not try to go for the home run right away, but just take what Iowa was willing to give them, keep J.J. McCarthy in rhythm, establish the running game, and then let J.J. Just make some easy, quick throws. And I thought that Michigan executed that pretty well. Definitely early in the game, the opening drive really set the tone. And then from there, the offense did enough, and J.J. did enough to keep control of that game. And against Iowa, the thing that you can't do is turn the ball over or give Iowa points on defense, because Iowa really thrives on that. And aside from one fumble that could have been a game-changing play, but ended up not being that, that really was the only mistake for J.J. McCarthy. He played a really clean game.
Well, one of the most impressive things to me on Saturday was the play of that offensive line. I'm one of these weird guys that goes back the next day and watches the game, sometimes a couple of times, and focuses on that offensive line. And when you just did that, they were physical, and they look like they're coming together. Michigan has the 5 guys they want out there now for the most part, but they really look good, didn't they?
Yeah, I thought that was the best performance of the season from Michigan's offensive line, and I think Jim Harbaugh said that as well. That line has, as you mentioned, had some fluctuations early in the season with different guys in and out of the lineup. It was really the first time we got to see Michigan's starting 5 play a full game together, and I think we're starting now to see that chemistry come together with that group. Having Trevor Keegan back at left guard, I think really gave them a lift. And that was an impressive performance in the way that they were able to just consistently get some push in the running game against a really good defense. It looked to me like every time pretty much Michigan ran the ball, the running backs were getting 2 or 3 yards before first contact at least. And that's a good recipe. In a game where Michigan wanted to control the ball, wanted to sustain drives, the ability to get 4, 5, 6, 7 yards a pop in the running game consistently was a really big factor.
One of the other things when you watch this offensive line, Austin, and I don't know if fans pay attention to this during the game, they are very athletic. I think just about all 5 of these guys can pull and get out in front of the running backs. That's really impressive to be that big and that athletic, isn't it?
Yeah, I think one of the real keys to Michigan's success over the past 2 years has been the development of that offensive line and the identity that Michigan has formed around some of those gap scheme running plays where you get the offensive line pulling around in space and leading the way for the running backs. And that's really been what Michigan has hung its hat on the last 2 years, and it's a big part of why this is a different Michigan team now than it was even just a few years ago. And I think that this group that Michigan has now, the potential is really high with this group. We talked about, could this offensive line be even better than last year's, which was really good. And I think through the first 4 games, that definitely was still, a work in progress. It was clear early on in the season that the offensive line still was working out some things, but the arrow is definitely pointing up for that group. It looks like now they've got their 5 together, and they're starting to really get on a roll. And I think that we're just going to see that offensive line continue to get better throughout the season.
Well, early in the season, you're looking for positives to develop. And I think one of them, for me anyway, and I think for a lot of folks, has been the play of Luke Schoonmaker at tight end. Jim talked about that at the presser yesterday, saying if he continues to progress, he could be one of the best tight ends that have ever played at Michigan, which I thought was surprising to hear him say that. But you'd like to see Eric All out there, but man, Luke's off to a great start, isn't he?
Yeah, I mean, Michigan is fortunate to have in that tight end room a number of players who are capable of playing at a really high level. And, of course, Eric All is a guy that, has done it at Michigan. I mean, came into this year, his senior year with really high expectations. And so it's unfortunate that he hasn't been able to be out there the last couple of weeks. But the silver lining to that is that it's not just, one great tight end in that room. It's Luke Schoonmaker. As you mentioned, Jim Harbaugh's been consistent in saying that Luke is right there with Eric All in terms of, one of the best tight end tandems in the Big Ten, if not in the country. And so Michigan is going to be able to continue to be productive at that position, even if Eric All isn't able to come back anytime soon. And so, yeah, we've just seen Luke Schoonmaker continue to elevate his game and really be a well-rounded tight end. Maybe he had a reputation as, kind of the blocking tight end, and Eric All was more of the receiving tight end. But I think, especially since Eric has sit down, we've seen that Luke really can do it all. He can be a dominant blocker, and he also can be a factor in the passing game.
Another plus on Saturday was the return to action for Donovan Edwards. It was nice to see him trot out in the field, and he's getting worked back into game shape. But it's clear when he's out there, he adds another dimension and so many more options to this offense, doesn't he?
Donovan Edwards definitely gives Michigan a different look in terms of being able to catch the ball out of the backfield, not just as a check down option or somebody that catches screens, but as somebody who can make plays down the field as a receiver. And we saw that on the scramble drill when J.J. McCarthy had a rusher in his face, had to bail on the pocket. Donovan Edwards just finds the open space in the back of the end zone, and J.J. finds him for a touchdown. So those are the kind of plays that you see from Donovan Edwards when he's on the field, not to mention his ability as a running back. I think he had 5 carries in that game, so he didn't carry the ball a ton, but he made the most of it. He had productive runs when the ball was in his hands, and I think especially as the season goes on, that's going to be so important because Blake Corum's had close to 30 carries the last 2 weeks. And that's a big workload. And I think Blake Corum can handle it. He's gotten himself in really good shape. So I don't think that there's a concern that Blake Corum is going to wear down. But it's a long season, and you need more than one running back. Last year, Michigan had 2 that they leaned on really heavily. And I think having Donovan Edwards back to be able to share that load is really important.
Well, after the Maryland game, Austin, I was hearing from Michigan fans, and I even heard Joel Klatt questioning the play calling, how it's handled. But I thought on Saturday it was really good, especially the scripting on that first drive from Coach Weiss and Coach Moore. Got the guys into a nice rhythm, didn't they?
Yeah, definitely. That 15-play script that they had going into the Iowa game really set things up well for the offense. It helps when you're getting 5 or 6 yards on sort of your base running plays, and there's a lot of things that you can build off of that. On the touchdown to Ronnie Bell on the opening drive, you can see Iowa really biting on the fake to Blake Corum because Michigan had so much success running between the tackles, and then you give the ball to the wide receiver on the end around, and he's got a clear path to the end zone. So Michigan really set things up really well on that opening drive, and I feel like the play calling has been smooth through the first 5 games. I didn't necessarily think against Maryland that there was a big rhythm issue with the play calling per se. There definitely were times when Michigan's offense was in rhythm and times when it wasn't. But I didn't necessarily think that was a play calling issue. But it can always get better, and I think Matt Weiss has said that, and Sharon Moore has said that, and there's certainly some intrigue. I think we all have been curious to know exactly how that works, what that process is like between those two guys, and they've been a little bit cagey about saying exactly how it works. But however they're doing it, it seems to be working okay for them so far. They're 5-0, and the offense just seems to be getting better.
Yeah, and looking back at the Maryland game, I didn't think it was so much a matter of play calling as it was execution, and a lot of overthrown passes, some missed blocks, and you're going to get that early in the season anyway.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I mean, if JJ connects on even a couple of those throws down the field against Maryland that were open, then I think we're talking about that game differently. Or if a couple of those plays where, JJ might just need to, eat the sack or throw the ball away, if he does that on a couple plays, I think we might be talking about it differently too. So I agree with you. There definitely were times against Maryland and sometimes against Iowa too that the offense maybe got out of rhythm or didn't look as crisp as it did at other times, but that's just kind of the ebb and flow of a game, of a season. I think, you want to be in rhythm all the time, but there's going to be points where you have to grind through it a little bit, and I think that's just where Michigan is right now.
Well, the defense I thought was pretty darn good Saturday. I know they gave up some yards, some passing yards specifically in the second half, but overall they were pretty rock solid, weren't they?
Yeah, I mean, look, that Iowa offense is really struggling. That's not an offense that's going to put up a lot of points or a lot of yards on anybody. And I think going into the game, Michigan's defense knew that if they could stop the run, Iowa just wasn't going to be equipped to throw the ball and put points on the board. And that, ultimately, I think what we saw, although there were some times that Iowa was able to throw the ball effectively. And I think, if there's one thing that you look at for Michigan's defense coming away from that Iowa game is you do look back at the second half and say, hey, there were some times that Michigan let Iowa have some things in the passing game for an offense that has been really struggling in that area. You'd like to take that away. So I think overall the defense did what they needed to do. They shut down Iowa for a half, and then when they needed to make a couple stops in the fourth quarter, they did that. So I think that was, everything that you needed from Michigan's defense in that game, but they also came away with some things they can look at and get better from.
So after 5 weeks, Austin, would you say this team is about where you thought it would be, or maybe a little bit better?
I think it's about where I thought it would be, with the caveat that we didn't know what this quarterback situation was going to look like. Before the season going into it, I couldn't have told you who Michigan's starting quarterback would be at this point. I thought it was really something that could go either way. And so I think that now that J.J. McCarthy has won the job, and with Cade McNamara being out for a little bit, there's no debate, no question about J.J. being the quarterback. I think that does change the complexion a little bit of this team. There's just more stuff you can do with J.J. McCarthy as the quarterback. Both of them have their strengths and weaknesses, and Cade McNamara, brought things to the table that were different than what J.J. can do. But we're seeing now what this team looks like with an offense and a quarterback who are really, synced up in a way that plays to the strengths of the quarterback. And I think it's an exciting thing. I think if you're a Michigan fan to look at where this offense is and see the potential, because every game J.J. McCarthy makes a couple plays where you're like, man, that's it's a different offense, even than the one we saw last year. And so I think that's an exciting thing and something that is going to continue to evolve as the season goes along.
Well, we're still learning about this team every week, and this week we get to the midway point of the season. So if you were looking at the big picture and you said, what are the areas of concern, both offensively and defensively, what would you say they are?
Yeah, I think defensively, we've talked about the pass rush at times this season, and there have been times when the pass rush has been really effective, and there have been times when it hasn't. When Michigan really needed to get after the quarterback against Iowa, when Iowa was in a position where they had to throw the ball to try to make a comeback, we saw Michigan really be able to pin its ears back and go after the quarterback, and really just that last drive that Iowa had when it was still a competitive game, Michigan really, just destroyed their offensive line. That's the potential of this pass rush when it's really working. And then there's other times that we've seen Michigan not be able to get to the quarterback as consistently. So I think you just like to see that pass rush continue to grow. Continue to be able to consistently put pressure on the quarterback and consistently finish. When you get pressure on the quarterback, you want to be able to get hits on the quarterback and sacks and disruptive plays and all of that. Offensively, there's not a lot that I look at with that offense and say that that's a worry or a concern. I think they can get better in every aspect of it. I think the decision making from J.J. McCarthy can continue to get better. Even if it's just one or two plays a game, there's still a couple plays you look at and say, that's a play where he just needs to eat the sack or just needs to throw the ball out of bounds instead of trying to make the great play. So that'll come with time and experience. But other than that, offensively, I feel like they've been really, really sharp.
Well, this Saturday, Michigan stays on the road, traveling to Bloomington. The Hoosiers are 3-2, but they are a team really struggling to find themselves, aren't they?
Yeah, I did for our preview series we do in the off season. I ended up doing the Indiana preview, so I spent some time talking with Tom Allen and some other people around their program, and it's been an interesting few years for them. In 2020, in the COVID year, they were one of the great stories in the country. They really looked like they'd turned the corner and had things set up for success, and then they had so many injuries last year. Such a disappointing year for them to start with such high expectations, and then just it was a struggle from start to finish for them. And so this year they're trying to reset things. They've got a transfer quarterback. They've got two new coordinators. Their offense is a lot of new pieces on their offense, and they're just trying to figure things out right now. From what I can tell, it's not like it was not going to be an overnight thing for Indiana to bounce back from that year they had last year. It was going to be more like try to build it back up to where they had it in 2020, and right now it looks like they still have a ways to go.
Oh, absolutely. And they're not the kind of a program or a team that can afford a lot of injuries, especially on the offensive line. And that's a mash unit through the first 5 games, a lot of injuries to that group. And you've got a new quarterback in Connor Bazelak. Can't get the running game going, can't protect the quarterback. I mean, he threw 44 times on Saturday. He looks like he's got a nice arm. But then again, his top 2 receivers were out injured for the game too. So it is hard to imagine Indiana having sustained success against Michigan Saturday, isn't it?
That was my big question with Indiana when I looked at their team. It's just they had so much turnover, especially at their offensive skill positions. You mentioned they bring in Connor Bazelak as the quarterback, a transfer from Missouri, so they've got a transfer starting at quarterback. Their top 2 running backs, I believe, were transfers who'd come in from other schools, and really their whole receiving core, aside from maybe 1 or 2 guys, were transfers. So a lot of new pieces on their offense to go with a new offensive coordinator in Walt Bell. And I think it's looked kind of like you would expect an offense with that much turnover, and then you factor in some injuries, as you mentioned, on the offensive line. It's just a tough situation. I think Tom Allen is a very good defensive coach. He's back to calling the defensive plays this year for Indiana, trying to, I think, get back to some of the things that really worked for them early on in his tenure. But to me, the question is, can they score? Can they score enough to be competitive with Michigan? And I'm not sure that they can.
On that IU defense, they've looked good at times. It's a veteran group, but they've been on the field way too long in all 5 of the games that Indiana's played. So, when you look at that, it should be another day for JJ and the offense to really fine-tune the attack, wouldn't you say?
Right, yeah. I think that Indiana's defense is going to be a pretty good test for Michigan. I mean, the thing about Indiana is they're really aggressive. They're going to blitz. They're going to get after you. And so, J.J. McCarthy's going to have to be ready for that. It's a different type of defense for sure than what Michigan saw against Iowa. So it'll be a good test in the sense of you prepared for one thing and now you have to prepare for a different thing. And I think that similar to Iowa though, the key is just don't help them out, don't give them points because their offense probably is not going to score enough on its own to win the game. And the way that they're going to have a shot is if Michigan gets some turnovers, makes mistakes. So I think it will be another good game from that standpoint for JJ and for the offense to just really, drill down on the little stuff and try to, take what they've done so far and even take it to another level.
Well, I know we're not supposed to look ahead. The team's not supposed to look ahead. We can. But if Michigan takes care of business like we expect them to in Bloomington this week, it sets up the first really marquee game of the season against Penn State. That's going to tell us a lot about just how good Michigan is, isn't it, Austin?
When you look at Michigan's schedule, that's the game that you would look at and say, is the game that's going to determine where Michigan is at going into the last week. And I say that knowing that Michigan is going to have other tough games. Michigan State has struggled, but they always bring their best game against Michigan. Illinois is maybe the surprise team in the Big Ten this year. So it's not like Penn State is the only tough game left on Michigan's schedule. But I think if you're, trying to look ahead and project and, peek into the future a little bit, I would say if Michigan wins that game against Penn State, then there's certainly a shot that it's 2 11-0 teams going into Columbus, which would be pretty wild. But there's a lot that has to happen, between now and then. And first it's Indiana, and then it's Penn State. And I think that Penn State game is going to be, going to be the marquee game probably nationally that week, and it's going to really tell us a lot about where Michigan is and how much of Michigan's success so far is going to really translate against the very best teams they play.
Final question before we let you get away, Austin, and it falls into the category other news around the Big Ten. Wisconsin let Paul Chryst go on Sunday. That shocked me, but I guess it's the new world of college football that we're in. But the timing surprised me. What about you?
Yeah, I was surprised. Of course, I wasn't surprised that there was pressure to make a change there, just because having watched Wisconsin over the last couple of years, it didn't look like the same Wisconsin program that we've gotten used to seeing. Wisconsin has had such an identity in the Big Ten as a team that just was rock solid on defense, rock solid running the ball, great offensive lines. Even in years when maybe they didn't have the talent or the quarterback play to be a great team, they always just there was a consistency with Wisconsin that you knew at minimum that they were going to run the ball and play great defense. And when you see a Wisconsin team, getting blown off the field the way that the way they were even against Illinois and the way they were against Ohio State, not a surprise to me that there was some pressure on Paul Chryst, but definitely a surprise to me that they made that move when they did this early in the season for a coach who had so much success there, really, been kind of synonymous with that program. A Wisconsin guy, like you think of Wisconsin, you think of Paul Chryst. So it was pretty surprising to see that just happen when it did.
No one doubts he's a good football coach. He is a class act. He's a Wisconsin alum, which makes it crazy. And, that's just the new reality we're in college football. So I'm sure we'll see more of that in the coming weeks from other programs. Here with us on the show today, talking about last week's Iowa game and looking ahead to Indiana Saturday, has been beat writer Austin Meek from The Athletic. Austin, always a pleasure to have you on the show, and we look forward to that next visit.
Anytime, Mike. Thank you.
On Quick Hits today, the only injury update we've had this week was concerning special teams ace Caden Colasar. It's not good news either. He tore his anterior cruciate ligament in his right knee on punt coverage late in the game Saturday. He will have surgery in the next few weeks and is done for the season. Caden is the son of John Colasar, who was a standout receiver for Michigan in the 80s. Other than that, no other injury news released by the athletic department. Here are a few game day notes of interest. We lead the series by a wide margin, 60 wins against 10 losses. The first meeting with IU was on November 3rd of 1900 in Ann Arbor, a 12-0 Michigan victory. Last year, these two teams met in Ann Arbor on November 6th, a 29-7 win for us. Tom Allen is in his 6th year as head man in Bloomington. He is 29-35. Last year, the wheels came off early for the Hoosiers, and they finished winless in Big Ten play, 2-10 overall. They returned 3 starters on offense, 6 on defense. This is a team relying heavily on portal transfers this year. Their last bowl appearance was in the 2020 Outback Bowl. They fell to Ole Miss 26-20. The weatherman says we'll see a mix of sunshine and clouds for the game, with temps in the upper 50s to near 60. A perfect football day if the forecast doesn't change. On paper, we have a huge advantage against these Hoosiers. They are a team that is reeling and has an injury list as long as your arm. Still, we need to be focused and show no mercy. That's what good teams do. That's what champions do. I expect we'll be all business this Saturday. Next week, we welcome Penn State to the Big House. To say this will be a pivotal moment in the season would be an understatement. The Nittany Lions have looked human in the last few weeks, but make no mistake, they are a good football team and they have a ton of talent. It will be a tipping point game for the season, rest assured. With us on our Visitors Edition Tuesday will be the radio play-by-play voice of Penn State football, Steve Jones. On Thursday's Michigan Game Day show, we'll hear from the longtime editor of our Michigan Bible, the Wolverine magazine, John Borton. That does it for now. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. Have a great Wolverine weekend, everyone. Think victory, beat Indiana. Until we meet again, take care, and as always, go blue. Thanks for joining us today on The Michigan Man, here on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V-Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew. Our listener lines are open 24/7 for your calls at 313-263-4842. That's 313-263-4842. Or email us at themichiganmanpodcast@yahoo.com. That's themichiganmanpodcast@yahoo.com. The Michigan Man Podcast is produced at the studios of Robin Lynn Productions, Allen Park, Michigan, and is not affiliated with the University of Michigan. Go Blue!